Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. Consider checking out the Teach the Geek to Speak Society. It's an ongoing monthly membership where you can get ongoing support with your public speaking. And you can find out about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Ian Peterman. He's the founder and CEO of Peterman Design Firm, helping clients bring their products to market via product design and development, branding, and startup consulting. He's also the host of the Conscious Design podcast and author of the recently released book, Conscious Design. I'm starting to sense a theme of consciousness here. I could be wrong. I'll ask him about that. I'm interested to learn more about his journey in product design, the motivation to start his podcast, and the impetus for writing his book. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Ian.
Thanks for having me, Neil. It's good to be here.
Wonderful. So from the bit of research I did on you, I saw that you studied industrial and product design. Where did the motivation to study that come from?
That was something that I've known since I was about 12 I wanted to do. And so I started working when I was about 13 or 14, doing some subcontracting work for my dad, who did contracting design work, and kind of helping him out and learning it, and I enjoyed it. And so from there I got an internship when I was 16 working in design, and I decided it was for me, and I've never left.
Wow. I always admire people that knew early on what they wanted to do. So 12, 13, that's pretty early. I studied engineering because my father told me to. I never had that interest in anything really. I was okay at math and science. I mean, I certainly wasn't the best. I wasn't the worst. When I finished high school, I certainly didn't have no internship at 16. Did I even have a job at 16? I don't even know if I made money at 16. But then I finally graduated high school. I had to figure out what I was going to do. He said, do engineering. I said, all right, engineering it is. But so I always admire people like yourself that had that drive early on to do something and actually stuck with it. So kudos to you. I saw it from your job history that you freelanced for a number of years before you actually took a position at a company. Was it difficult making that transition from essentially being self-employed to being an employee? And if so, what challenges did you face?
Well, yeah, contracting is always a different path, a more challenging path for some than a regular job. So I chose it because I wanted to get a lot of experience, and that meant not sitting at one company for a decade and then moving on. I wanted to get experience in different industries and different areas, and so freelancing, and I took up short-term contracts. So I'd work for a company for 6 months on just a short contract. That was the best way that I could think of to get the amount of experience that I wanted in different fields, because when you work in product development, you really should know a lot of different areas. And so that had its challenges, of course, because I was always looking for the next project, the next job to get on. But I think it was worth it in the end, the experience I was able to get from doing that.
Gotcha. One question that I actually just thought of now, the work that you did academically, did it prepare you for the work that you ended up doing when you actually started working in industry?
Some. I got my degree after I had been working for, I think at that time I had almost 10 years of experience when I finished the degree. So definitely the earlier years, I went into college when I was 16, and I would say that the combination of having gotten an internship at that age and college, that's really where I kind of got thrown into the real work, and a lot of my experience came from, and then school just kind of afforded additional points of information, kind of the academic approach to it. But I ended up having so much hands-on learning over the years that it was not probably as informative as it would be to someone without any experience.
So from what I hear you saying, Ian, it sounds like you could have gotten by without that degree.
Yeah, I definitely could have. especially I started my own design firm, so there's no no degree requirements for your starting your own company.
That's absolutely correct. I'm actually, it's always interesting when I ask people about degrees and then how applicable those degrees were to the work that they ended up doing. Because I have an acquaintance that I have here in San Diego where I live, and he helps people with non-traditional backgrounds get into the tech world by becoming what do you call them, software developers and software engineers. And it can be difficult sometimes because a lot of these companies, they just have this expectation that you have a computer science degree to take on these jobs. But it slowly but surely, companies are starting to come around to the idea that maybe you don't need that computer science degree, that you can go through a coding boot camp like the one that my friend runs, and you have all the skills necessary to at least get your foot in the door of these companies, because a lot of times you end up learning a lot on the job anyway. So what good is
Right.
a computer science degree to have? What good is it to have a computer science degree if a lot of the what you do ends up being on the job training anyway? It just seems like a very expensive degree and a lot of student loan debt.
Yeah, I would say that the biggest benefit of going through the degree and program like that is really the connections that I got because I was with other designers. So it's the network value, and it's mostly what you put in is what you get out. You can go through college and get very little out of it, or you can maximize it. So if it's for me, if it makes sense, like I'm not gonna push my kids to go to college just because it's got to actually be valuable in some way, not just debt that I'm probably gonna have to help them pay off. So yeah, I agree with that.
No question. So you have a podcast called Conscious Design. You have a book called Conscious Design. It seems like conscious design is on your mind. So what's the difference between conscious design and unconscious design?
So the idea behind conscious design is basically, we're all familiar with human-centered design. That's a pretty common word we put out there. Everybody knows a buzzword. But conscious design is taking that to the next level, in that it's great to look at the human-centered design. That's basically a really nice way of saying ergonomics and how do we feel when we use the product. But there's a lot more elements to it that have in the industry been ignored quite heavily. So what is and for me, those areas are adding, what is the environmental impact of the product from the entire supply chain, not just the last assembly we like to look at, and what is the social impact of the product? Are we doing any social good with it? Are we harming anyone with the product? And it's really just trying to help people be conscious. And the reason I call it conscious is you have to become aware, and that is, if you're conscious, you're aware. So that's what conscious design is trying to look at more of the product development process and product design process than just the human ergonomics of the product once it gets out there.
Gotcha. How do you tell whether there is a negative environmental impact or a negative social impact?
Environmental impact is pretty easy at this point. It's, how much shipping are you doing? What is the CO2 uh, or cost basically for shipping a product? Those are pretty standard numbers. We know how much carbon or how much environmental impact pretty much every process has. So it's looking at what are those impacts and how do we mitigate, reduce, or ideally completely remove that impact in some way or offset it. Offsetting is something that we do as well, but removing is even better. For social impact, it's looking a lot of things that we look at and start having a conversation around is, well, what is, if this product is going into a certain market, what is their culture there? Are we being sensitive to the people who are actually using this, who are actually buying this? Are we making sure that we're aware? Are we being inclusive in the packaging? Are we being inclusive in the product? Is this something that we, being very careful to not say this product is for everyone if it only fits, a certain market. So it's, we want to make sure that there's honesty there in, in what the product is and how society is being impacted by it or viewing it and what we're portraying it as.
Okay. When it comes to the environmental impact and social impact, is there ever an instance where the costs go up if you want to take either or both of those into account? And if so, how do you convince the company to take on those costs?
So it really depends. There's definitely times where there are increased costs, especially on the social front, and for companies that are wanting to add in, a social good component to what they're doing, what their brand mission is. But the cost is almost always offset by the ability to have more loyal customers who share your beliefs, that are going to stay customers for longer. It's also, you can often charge more realistic prices. So you can actually charge what it's going to cost, and people will spend more. It's kind of the whole idea behind, like, organic food sometimes costs more, but lots of people buy organic food because that's what they want. And it's one of those decision points. Well, if you want something that checks off all your boxes, you're going to pay what you need to. And so there's the idea of it being less profitable is kind of a misnomer. It will sometimes cost more, but you will definitely recoup that money if you're smart about how you price things and what you do afterwards.
Got you. So just pass the cost on to the consumer, and they'll be none the wiser.
Well, they should be wiser, because they
Right.
should see your price is higher and this other one's not. But
Yeah.
it's all in telling the story and saying, this is, yeah, our prices are higher, but this is why.
Why?
And if your why is real, then great. If you're just raising your prices, then you should look at that and change it.
Yeah, no question. So, Ian, what was the motivation for starting your own firm?
That really just came from, I actually ended up, when I was finishing my degree, got to know a few people, and we started a design firm together. So we ran that for a few years, which was a great experience. I loved it. Running my own firm was definitely, I considered it easier than just freelancing. So that after a few years, the partners they all just wanted to go off and do their own thing. And so I decided that I wanted to keep running an agency and a design firm. So I started my own, and that's how Peterman Firm was started.
Okay, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
The people that were in the firm with you, did they stay in that industry, or did they do other things?
They're onto other things. One's in ads now. One's in has a couple startups, and then one's basically a maker. They make some really cool products of their own. So they just wanted to kind of launch their own things.
Okay, I got you. So it's great that the whole idea of having the design firm didn't die because the others, chose to do other things. You kept it going. So that's great. I said in the intro also that you have a podcast called the Conscious Design Podcast. What do you hope people get from listening to the podcast?
Yeah, so the podcast, I kind of break up. There's two types of episodes. One are more short form, just talking through product design, sustainability, things like that. Really just trying to provide basic information, and they're honestly answering questions that clients over the years have asked me, and then I think would be valuable for people that are wanting to understand more about product development and sustainability and how that all goes together. And then the others are interviews that I do, and the goal there is to help just be a platform for people that have different, interesting, useful ideas about how we can be more sustainable, more socially conscious. How do we approach different problems in our world, and provide a platform for those people to share their ideas that may not be on another platform. I often to talk to people that it's their first time on a podcast, and it's their first time, sharing something like that. And so that's my goal, is to be that platform around conscious design. How do we solve the problems that we know are around us in unique and interesting ways? And hopefully that will let somebody listening go, oh, that's a great idea, I want to support that idea. Let's make that happen. Or come up with their own idea, their own solution to something.
Cool. In my instance, that the fact that some of the people that I interview, it's their first podcast too. That has been the case, and honestly, it typically comes down to me just being interested in their story and not really thinking, is this somebody that if I have them as a guest, I'm going to get a lot of downloads or views? I don't even think about that. I look at their background, look at their story, and think, is this something that I want to know more about? It's really selfish of me, really. I'm not even thinking about everybody else. It's like, do I think this is interesting? And if I think it's interesting, then everybody else will think it's interesting. Well, that's not true, but I still think it anyway. I still want to talk to them anyway, so I have them on. But about your book, so you have a book that came out not too long ago. Congratulations on that. It's called Conscious Design.
Thank you.
So you put this book out and you want people to read it. What do you want people to get? The takeaways well, firstly, what's the book about? And what do you want people to take away from the book?
Yeah, so the book is really about laying out, how do we have a conscious design process? What does that look like? And so we broke up the book into 4 sections. The first is talking about conscious design from, basically the theory level. Here's what it means. Here's what to think about. Here's examples of companies that are implementing some or different parts of what a complete conscious design approach would be, because there's a lot of really great companies out there doing some or all of it. And so the goal of it was to kind of bring it all together and bring the information in that everybody's doing and say, here, if we put it all together in a box, look at what we can achieve if we actually do this. And then the next section that we have is what we call legacy branding, which is every brand has a legacy, whatever you leave behind, what you're known for. And a lot of brands, especially startups, don't think about the long term of what their brand is going to be recognized for. What are they standing for? And so when you're building, a conscious design product, you should also be thinking about the brand. So that we brought in as well. And then what I did was I went through the physical hardware product development process, kind of A to Z, without going too overboard or too in depth. And I ask questions and point out, here, this is kind of a normal process, but here's how you can think about this in a conscious way. Here's questions you should be asking yourself as you're going through the product design, the packaging design, the software, things like that, in order to basically give a little bit of a roadmap. If somebody said, oh, I want to design a product, but I want to do it in a conscious way, how would I possibly kind of step through those steps and ask the right questions? And then I also have, just the tail end of the book, is a section on disruptive technology. And it's really just talking about, we're in a place where just we need more technology that is disruptive, that we need to make big change, and how that's happened in the past, how it's happening now, and different technologies that I think are interesting and we should be looking at more. And so it's just kind of my thoughts on that to get people to think a little bit more future. What should we be aiming for? How do we get there?
I understand. I would think that with a lot of startup companies, a big concern of theirs is, how are we going to make money by selling whatever we're selling, whatever product or service we're selling? And that's probably what motivates a lot of their decisions. Where in I guess the priority of, well, where should branding come in them having, or where should branding come in their listing of their priorities?
Branding honestly should be in your top 3, because basically branding happens by accident. If you're focused on everything else and you ignore it, you're going to end up with some brand it'll be whatever people recognize you for. It'll be what people think of you. And if you're not creating it consciously, you're not creating it and being aware of what you're creating, you're going to have to change it later, and it may not be what you wanted it to be. And so I see branding as something that needs to be thought of very, very intentionally at the beginning, because it's very tied into what's your mission, what is your vision, what are you trying to achieve, what do you stand for. And especially in the world now, where the average consumer is becoming more and more interested in what is your brand doing for the world and your community and the environment. Those are things that you can't get away with by just focusing on profit. That can't be number one anymore. Profit will obviously needs to be something that's focused on, because if you don't survive, you can't do any good anymore. And I remind people of that, because I also have people who are like, oh, I don't care about the profits at all. I just want to do this amazing product and support these charities and things like that. I'm like, well, you can't support charities if you aren't making money. If you're if your business closes, you're not helping anyone at all. So we got to make sure you're profitable too. So it's really kind of stepping out and saying, well, profits are important. We need those. Your brand definitely needs to be important, and deciding what everything that goes with that brand is very key to being successful.
No question. So Ian, your background is in product design and development. And when I think of somebody with that kind of background, I don't think this is the best person to get in front of people to talk. But why not? Why not? Why can't it be that way? Is speaking in front of people something you've always been good at? And if not, what'd you do to get better at it?
It's definitely taken time to get here. I didn't take public speaking classes in college very intentionally. I wasn't the greatest presenter in the classes that I did have to. And so honestly, it just came from lots of practice. I ended up basically making myself start recording video testimonials with clients at one point. I also have spent enough time in Zoom, because I've worked with clients all over the world. And so I've spent time in front of camera enough that I got more comfortable. And then now I've spent I started getting on podcasts, and that definitely helped. Not having the video portion of it, and being able to just have my voice and know that I didn't have to worry about my facial expression and things like that. And then I got into video, video podcasts and things like that. So it just took practice and just jumping in and doing it really. And now I'm on a podcast almost every week, and I run my own podcast, which has video on it. And so now I'm much more comfortable.
All right. It seems like it kind of came out of necessity almost. And for me, it certainly did come out of necessity. I had to give presentations in front of management, and I was terrible at it at first. And I realized eventually I didn't want to be terrible at this every time I have to do this. So I had to do it every month. So I did something I got to get better at, just so I don't look like a fool every time I got to present in front of the CEO. And so I eventually did. I learned my lesson eventually. So when it comes to giving presentations, do you ever get nervous before you give one? And if so, how do you deal with your nerves?
I definitely get nervous before presentations. Usually I don't do too much. I drink some water, and then I just step out. And once I start, then it starts getting easier. So that's usually what I'm just nervous before, but once I'm doing it, it goes away.
Huh.
So I've just learned to sit there and deal with it, knowing it'll go away as soon as I'm actually, because then I'm focused on what I'm doing. I'm focused on the presentation, and then I can live with that.
Interesting. Okay. I've never actually heard that tip before. Drink water. Interesting. Okay. I think I'll try that next time, but before I give a presentation, drink some water and see what happens. Hopefully I don't drink too much, and then you're up there and then you need to pee.
Yes, only a little. Only a little.
Don't down the whole glass of it. Like, oh man, now you're rocking from foot to foot. You're up there. It's like,
Yeah,
I overdid it. I overshot it.
definitely avoid that. Not too much water.
It's like, I'm trying to get out of here as quickly as possible. Run to that bathroom. Oh man. So, when it comes to presenting in front of others, Ian, what would be your top tips for people who are listening or watching who want to get better at doing so?
I obviously, the first one is practice as much as possible. Start small, so start presenting to a few people, and grow from there. Don't, if it's easier, start trying to get on a podcast, do your voice only, get basically baby step it if that works. Or the other approach, and I've seen people do this too, they just dive into it. So presenting, I am much more, I can present without notes. So I actually prefer free form conversation kind of presentation, but it's also, some people need more preparation. So figuring out whether you need the preparation or not, and whether, for me, too much preparation doesn't work really well. I get, I start reading rather than presenting, and so I need less things to try to read, because that's not, presenting. Nobody wants to be read to during a presentation. We can all read what's on the board. So it's figuring out what's going to be the best cues for you when you're doing a presentation as well.
Yeah, I mean, maybe when you were a kid, before you could read, maybe you want your mom and dad to read you a bedtime story, but that's about it. Once you become an adult, like I can read now. You could have just sent me these notes, and I could have read them at my convenience. But now I'm sitting here looking at you read something that I could read myself. Like, what are we doing here? This is a waste of my time.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm fully with you there, Ian. Well, thank you for being a guest on the podcast, Ian. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so if you're interested in the book, consciousdesignbook.com, you'll find a little bit of information and the link to Amazon, where it's live right now. We have the ebook version, and we're working on a paperback and audio version in a bit. And then if you want to contact me about the firm, you can go to petermanfirm.com. That's petermanfirm.com, and you can contact us. And we're also on social media at Peterman Firm on most of them.
Excellent. Well, everybody, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson, founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. Consider checking out the Teach the Geek to Speak Society. It's a monthly membership where you can get ongoing support for your public speaking. And you can learn about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Neil.